Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session. We're going to be having a wonderful guest with us today. For today, the AWS DevOps. We come every week with information, practicality, and a lot loaded to keep you informed and also give you some very, very valuable skills. You know how we do it. All right. So today we're having a special guest with us today, and in this our study series, we're talking about something very important in security, which is about firewalls. And in AWS, security actually comes first before any other thing. We look and think and work security. And I think today's session with our speaker today has a lot to offer. We'll be talking about deployment of FortiGate firewalls on AWS. How can we deploy this FortiGate firewall on AWS? And we have a very, very outstanding speaker with us today. His name is Samuel Modupe. Before Samuel Modupe comes up, I'm just gonna give him some hype a bit. Let's hype Modupe. And it's not just hyping him, it's actually real. Whatever I'm going to say about him right now is actually real. This guy is very, very, very knowledgeable in the security field. He's a engineer, an assurance lead, also a cloud engineer. Samuel Modupe has a ISP, CISM, CCNP, CEH, and a Master of COBIT. These are like some of the certifications that he has. Samuel Modupe has about a decade years of experience in cybersecurity. So if you're into cybersecurity, you should be watching this. And engineering roles. He has over 10 years experience in cybersecurity and engineering roles. He's specializing in security infrastructure and architecture protection. He's a team lead. He has consistently demonstrated expertise in designing and implementing robust security solutions to mitigate risk and protect sensitive data across various industries, including telecoms, finance, technology, and consulting. Yes. So Samuel Modupe is currently the head of security engineering in a very prominent bank in the country. We won't want to mention that, but if we mention it, you will know. I'm going to bring Samuel Modupe on stage. Samuel. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Great to have you. Great to see you. Yeah.
So, Samuel, I'm gonna leave the stage for you to do your
Okay.
magic. See you guys very soon.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm indeed delighted to be here. I appreciate the group for giving me this opportunity to share my wealth of knowledge. Okay. I don't know if you could see my slide. I don't know if you could bring my slide to the forefront. Okay, yeah. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here just to share some thoughts and also walk you through how to deploy FortiGate firewall in AWS. So my slides are pretty direct. Yes. So my name is Samuel Mudupe. And this is just a brief run through of what we'll be discussing or be sharing thoughts on. I'll be sharing thoughts on what we call the next gen firewall, the next generation firewall. Looking at the firewall best practices. If you were to manage a firewall, what are some of the best practices you need to put in place or you need to have in place? Then, based on the case study for today, we'll be looking at the FortiGate next generation firewall. We'll be looking at how it is deployed, what are the deployment models, and we'll be doing a demo where we'll be deploying a live FortiGate, and we'll be opening the floor for question and answers. Okay, so a next gen firewall. But first of all, just to speak to what is a firewall, a lot of you who are in IT, or if you're new to IT, there's a buzzword firewall, 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 firewall. But what's a firewall? Actually, a firewall is a security appliance that provides security by monitoring incoming and outgoing data. So from what comes in and what goes out, you're able to have visibility. You're able to deny what ought not to come in, and you're able to permit what should. So it's more like a list of permit and deny. That is what a firewall is from a basic sense. So it has a defined set of rules where you're able to define what is allowed to go out and what is allowed to come in. Now, but when you talk about the next generation firewall, which is a generation of firewall, is a type of firewall that has advanced capabilities, where you have advanced capabilities like content filtering, web filtering, antivirus, threat prevention. You have a whole lot of advanced features embedded into the firewall. That is what we call a next gen firewall. And it's able to do functions like deep packet inspection, where it's able to, whether you're using HTTPS or you're using a form of secure connection, is able to get deep visibility to be able to protect you. It can do advanced malware detection, application control, and a whole lot. A whole lot. And the beauty with the firewall is that you can deploy it on-prem in the cloud. You can deploy it as an infrastructure as a service. In terms of EC2 instance, you can also deploy it as a. Yes, the slides will be shared. Thank you, Dennis. The slides will be shared after this session. We'll share it on the group, the user group. And you can deploy it either in the private or public cloud. Wherever it is, you can actually deploy the firewall, which helps you in protecting your network from intruders. Now, what are some of the best practices whenever you talk about firewall? What are the top 12 things you need to pay attention to? One is you need to understand what we call denial. By default, in the firewall, you're blocking everything. Nothing goes in, nothing comes in. That is the default rule. That is what sits at the bottom of it. You say, I don't trust anybody. I don't trust connections from outside or inside. That is what we call the block all, or the deny all, or implicit deny all. So that is what you have in the firewall. You need to understand that that's one of the basic rules you have in every firewall. Then the second principle is what we call the principle of least privilege, where you are granting access based on need, based on demand. So up top of the deny all, you are giving access based on what is required. You are not permitting everybody in, you are not permitting everybody out, but you are just giving access based on need, based on need. So that is what we call the principle of least privilege. You also need to understand that is what they call source IP address, destination IP address, destination port. So source IP address is where are you coming from. Destination IP address is where are you going to. Then a port is what services would you want to consume. In some instances, what protocol, what type of service, whether it is TCP, transport control, transmission control protocol, or a UDP, user datagram protocol. So these are some of the best practices you will need to have within a firewall for you to define the rule. When we enter our demo, I'll be showing you all of these things when we create these rules. So you specify the source, the destination IP, and the destination port. To also make it easier, you use group objects, because many a times when you're configuring a firewall, you need to be able to group objects together. Maybe your local area network, you can group it into an object so that you can reuse them without having to type IP everywhere, without having to memorize IPs here and there. You can actually create an object and place that IP or place that property on it. You could also do network segmentation, which is one of the key things that the firewall gives you. It breaks down your network into smaller chunks where you can now control what comes from one network to another network. So, for instance, in an organization, there's an outside network, which is the internet, which you have everybody on the internet. Now, there's an inside network, which is restricted to your organization. The firewall can bring that logical segmentation where you have the outside and you have the inside. So you can now determine what will go from outside to inside. And even within the inside, you might have departments, you might have prod resources, non-prod resources. You might have external people connecting. Now you need to segment this because these are different areas or different areas of your network. So a firewall can help you with network segmentation, where you can isolate each of the parts. For most developers who will be on this call, you know that having test environment connecting to production environment is actually not security best practice. Now, a firewall can actually give you that logical separation where test doesn't talk to production, production doesn't talk to test. Another best practice you need to also understand is what we call defense in depth, where you have multiple layers. In security, you need to have defense in depth. When you're coming from the internet, what are the checks you need to have? You need to have a first gate, a second gate, a third gate before you get to your destination. So when it comes to deploying firewall in a large scale, you look at defense in depth, which is having multiple layers of security. You also need to look at regularly updating and reviewing your firewall rules. You create a rule today, it might be relevant today, but tomorrow it might be obsolete. You might have permitted connection for a consultant or for someone to a resource. And once the person is done with that particular job, you need to take out the rule. So these are some of the best practices you need to have. Then you also need to log and monitor. You need to log and monitor these activities. Beyond what you have permitted, you need to be sure that you're actually not permitting the bad guys. You're not actually permitting a threat actor to have access to your resources. So a next-gen firewall like FortiGate can give you visibility even to a threat that someone is trying to exploit a vulnerability in production. Someone is do trying to and an adversary is trying to break into your network, so you can get that level of visibility. And also backup is very very key. It's an appliance. It can pack up. You could just wake up one day and see that your firewall is down. What would you do? Would you need to rebuild all the rules? Would you need to rebuild the firewall? But if you have a backup configuration, in minutes you can get running. And there's also the aspect of redundancy and high availability, especially when you're in a large network. You need to be able to balance that if one appliance goes down, you have another one standing, where you have the primary firewall and you have a secondary, a master and a slave relationship. You also have to update the firewall software regularly. I tell you, one of the things you need to do managing a firewall is to be able to do firewall maintenance, update the software. Because today it might be FortiGate vulnerability you have on the headlines. Tomorrow it might be Cisco. Next tomorrow it might be Checkpoint. You need to ensure that you are using the latest firewall operating system. Then lastly, you need to have what we call a structured change management. You don't want people entering into your firewall and then permitting everything they like. You need to ensure that for every rule or any permission that is given, it actually went through a approval process where it was vetted and it was approved. So these are some of the best practices you need to have in mind when it talks about a firewall, administering a firewall, managing a firewall. They are very, very key. Now, FortiGate firewall. Now, what's so special about FortiGate firewall? It's one of the common or most common firewall you find around. One, because of its ease of deployment. We'll see that in our demo. We see that it's very efficient in securing your network, whether it's at the branch, whether it's in data center, and it gives you visibility. Yeah. Now, FortiGate on AWS delivers next generation firewall capabilities such as VPN, security management. It has a whole lot, and it can integrate seamlessly with other AWS services like the load balancer, the transit gateway, and other security services. So these are some of the value adding points why FortiGate is actually out there, is quite popular. Okay, so how do you deploy? So these are deployment models, and these deployment models is generic. So whether it's a FortiGate firewall or any other firewall you are deploying out there, this also follows these models. Now, because we are talking about the cloud, we're looking at the model as in respect to the cloud, to the public cloud. AWS. So, but if you had come on-prem, you have a similar of this, but not in terms of infrastructure. It's all infrastructure typically. So, for infrastructure as a service, you can have a single FortiGate VM, a virtual machine, single FortiGate uh, EC2 instance that is launched and is running. You could have what we call an active and passive FortiGate within a zone, an availability zone. You can actually deploy active two firewalls, a primary active and a secondary passive within an availability zone. You could also deploy an active passive within multiple zones, where you have active in one availability zone and passive in another availability zone. For instance, you can have active in East US, while you have passive in West US. So if anything were to happen in East US or the availability zone in that region, okay, so even you just remind me that in a region you have three availability zones. So you can actually have these zones separated even within a region. So that's one methodology. You could also have it across multiple zones with a transit gateway integration. Lastly, it can be deployed as a SaaS where you have cloud native firewall. FortiGate has that capability where you have firewall as a service, and we'll be seeing that from the deployment model. So, from what you can see from the diagram here, you see how a single FortiGate VM or firewall looks like. So you have a single FortiGate firewall across zones. So where you have this firewall is sitting here, you have AWS instances like your EC2 instances routing traffic to the FortiGate through the VPC to the internet through the internet gateway. You could have that as your public facing network and your protected or private facing network. Now, when you have multiple FortiGate firewall, you have to do what we call high availability, where you're able to connect both of them so that they can work hand in hand. So that is what we call high availability, where you have a primary FortiGate A and you have a secondary FortiGate, which is B, and both of them are able to talk to each other. If one goes down, automatically the second one picks up. So that is what high availability gives you within a cloud infrastructure like AWS. Now, another thing based on those deployment model, you have an active passive where just to illustrate, so your master goes down, you're able to route all your traffic through the slave, so all within a zone, for instance. So and these are just typically the IPs. If you see here, the secondary IPs are the same while the primary IPs are different. So if there were to be any issue with the primary, you are able to fail over, you're able to move your traffic to the slave, and the traffic will go seamlessly. Your user wouldn't even have an idea that the firewall went down. Nobody would know. Nobody would typically know until you get alert or you log on to the firewall and you know that you are in the secondary. So that is one of the deployment models you might have. Then you could also have active passive between multiple zones where you have availability zone A and availability zone B. And in this instance here, if availability zone A goes down, you're able to fill over to availability zone B. So whether it is whichever availability zone pairing that you're using, you're able to route traffic accordingly. And as you can see here, the primary IP addresses are different, but at the secondary level, because they are in different availability zone, you have difference, and but you'll be able to actually route traffic or fail over traffic at both ends. Then you could also have using a transit gateway where you have your spoke in different areas. You have your VPCs, you have multiple VPCs, and you decide to have a what we call a hub VPC. The hub VPC would host every of your security appliances, your FortiGate firewall, and you have the transit gateway that's able to actually route the traffic from each of the VPCs to the security VPCs. where the firewall will do its inspection and do its filtering. Then the FortiGate Cloud Native Firewall is one of the newest advancements or newest innovation that that FortiGate has done with its firewall, where they are moving away from physical appliances to virtual appliances, and even from virtual appliances, you are now having firewall as a service, and it is supported in AWS. And this is a typical example of how it works. For north to south traffic, that is traffic in or traffic going to the internet or coming from the internet, you're able to have your cloud native firewall FortiGate do inspection for you whenever you are going to the internet before it sends you to the NAT gateway and sends it to the internet. If it is east-west within your subnets, you're able to have your cloud native firewall that's able to actually do that inspection before they go from one subnet to the other. So these are some of the deployment models for FortiGate in AWS. Now, I'll be walking you through how to deploy FortiGate firewall from scratch. So let's say you have a new AWS tenant or console. How would you build or deploy the firewall from scratch? And that's what I'll be walking you through in this demo. Okay, so these are some of the references which could help with the deployment, but let's go to the tenants. Okay, so this is the AWS management console. I believe everyone is familiar with this console, which has all of your cloud services hosted. But to deploy this firewall, we need to have a virtual network, which we call a virtual private cloud, which is VPC. So we'll go to the VPC first, because the firewall will need to sit in our virtual network. So we'll go to a VPC. And if you are just building a new tenant, you have a default VPC here, but we'll be creating our own. So let's create this VPC. Let me call it my security hub VPC. Let me just call it that. I can give it an IP address. I can give it 192.168 0.0 dot slash 16 so that I can actually expand. One thing with VPC is that your classless interdomain routing, which is your block size, must be between slash 16 or slash 28. Then next, I can decide to put tags, but could just go ahead and create my VPC. So this will create a virtual network for me in AWS, and this is being created. You said it's successful, and let's see, it's available. So this is good. Now I'll go into my VPC and I'll create what we call subnets. And that is what you have on the next in the next lane, subnets. Now you can see here there are no subnets. I'll be creating subnets. Now I'll be creating two subnets. I'll be creating a subnet to represent my outside or my public network. I'll be creating another subnet to represent my internal network, which I will call my private network. So I will choose my VPC, then I would give it a name. So let me give it private, or let me call the first public, public subnet. Can give it any name, public subnet. I can choose the availability zone. US is A, is B, depending on the availability zone, but I just want to make it simple. Then I'll choose a subnet address space. So let me use 0.0/24. 24 gives me 256 IPs. You might decide to do a slash 28, can decide to do a slash 27, but 24 works and makes it easier. Then, okay, so create this. I can add the second subnet. So that's my first subnet. Let me call this my public subnet. Call this my private subnet. Okay, so this is my private subnet. I'll be giving it an IP 192.168.1.0/24. I used 0.0/24 in this one, so I'll be using this second one. Okay, so I have the two subnets that I need. Then I'll go ahead and create it. Now AWS is creating it, and boom, it's ready. I have them available. My private subnet and my public subnet. My private subnet is 192.168.1.0, and my public subnet is 192.168.0.0. Okay, so what would I now need to do? Because of my public subnet, I'll need to attach what we call an internet gateway. So I'm getting the environment ready to deploy my FortiGate. So I'm putting in everything that the FortiGate needs to work. So I go to my internet gateway. There's a default internet gateway that comes, but let me create mine. So let me call mine IGW IGW. Let me call it security. So okay, that's in my IGW security. So I'll create this internet gateway. Yeah, so you could see it's not attached. It has been created, but it's not attached. So what I'll then do is to attach this to a particular VPC. So, and if you want to guess which VPC will I add it to, I'll be adding it to my security hub VPC. So this is the VPC I'll be adding this particular internet gateway to. So let me add it. Okay, so I've attached it to it. So if we go to our VPC, we open it and we come down here. Okay, okay, no problem. So subnet has been created. Uh, Internet gateway has been created. I could also decide to create route tables. Route tables allow me to control how the traffic would go and where the traffic would go. So I could do that also. But we'll come back to route tables. So let's go to how we can now deploy the FortiGate firewall. So I have created my VPC, I've created my subnet, I've created my internet gateways. I think those three can help me with the deployment. Okay, but in bigger scenarios, I would definitely need a route table so as to be able to govern how traffic would go, but just for the deployment. So let me go to my AWS marketplace. Yeah. Okay. So I deployed a FortiGate. I think sometimes today, so that's why you can see here. But once you go here, this is what you would find by default. Once you go to your marketplace, this is what you would find. It just tells you that you can find, you can test, you can buy, you can deploy software solutions that run on AWS. But let's go to this now. Any product you can actually search. But for me, since I have it here, I will just do launch a new instance. I'll launch a new instance, or I could discover products here. So whatever products that is hosted in AWS, I could actually search for it. So you could see FortiGate Firewall being the first. The other services here, CrowdStrike, other security products you would find here. But I want to deploy FortiGate Firewall. So this is FortiGate. So it gives me a description that FortiGate will actually help in protecting my VPC, my virtual network, and keep it safe. So I go to continue to subscribe, and I'm also entitled to free trial. Okay, so it could ask me to choose a type. I could just decide to leave it as default, continue to configuration. So this is the AMI, the Amazon Manager Engine, the version of FortiGate, which will be deployed, which is 7.0, which is a much more stable version. Um, then I could go next, continue to launch. So there are various ways you can launch from a website, but I actually prefer to launch through EC2. So being an EC2, it will be a virtual appliance like an EC2 instance sitting on my VPC. So I'll launch through EC2. Yeah, it takes me to the EC2 instance page. Yes, where I can now choose, type a name. So this will be my FortiGate next gen firewall. Okay, I'm deploying one. I'm using the free tier. What other details do I have here? I need to create a key pair. The key pair, will allow me to always have access to it. 40 gates, PSK. Okay, so let me just create a speak here. Mm, okay, so I've downloaded that for safekeeping. Okay, I can downloaded that for safe. So let's go to the network. I'll be editing the network. So you see the beauty of the work we did at the VPC. We could come here to actually create a VPC, but since we've created that, we'll just be selecting the VPC we've created and subnet. First, I'll be adding the public subnet. By default, when FortiGate is being deployed, it comes with one interface, and that interface is majorly where it will deploy its outbound or its management interface. So I'll choose the public subnet. I could choose to assign a public IP, but I'll be creating an elastic IP and attaching it to the interface so that I'll have a public IP tied to it. Also create a security group. I didn't create one, but I think I need to create. Let me create one security group. Um, okay, choose select. Okay, I'll create one. Name the security group my security SG security group. Give it a name. Let's say security group for permissions. You can give it any name you like. So this is where you create both inbound and outbound. So I would want to do HTTPS because I'll be logging onto the firewall. HTTP. I'll be logging onto the firewall from the public internet. Okay, there's already this thing here. I know it's not advisable to have SSH. So let me just remove those other ones. These are the defaults. Okay, it's giving me a caution here. So this, I'll just leave this default here. Um, instance is not supported in my where I am. Okay, let me choose another one. Let's just use a small firewall. Okay, so this is supported in the North Virginia I chose. Okay, so let's launch this instance. Okay, it has launched the instance. Let's go to instances. Mm, I had some instances that terminated before. Let's do this is pending. Okay, that is being launched. Okay, so since I have an interface ID, I can attach an elastic IP to it. Elastic IP is a public IP. So okay, I'll associate an IP to subnet. So this is the elastic IP. You can give it a name, FortiGate public IP, because I'll be associating this with the public interface of FortiGate. So let me associate it and choose an instance FortiGate firewall. And this is the interface of the FortiGate. You can decide to just use an interface, whichever one. Any of both of them can help or work. So let me just attach it to the network interface. Okay, so it has been associated. Let me go back to my instance. FortiGate is running. It's still initializing. So let's wait a bit. Okay, so since we have this, let's see if our FortiGate is up. Take the IP, public internet, and see if it comes up. It's still initializing. Let's see. Okay, let's see. Okay, so on my route table, which I've associated, let me attach the public subnet. Can have both of them associated. Let me remove this. I put my internet gateway as my gateway. Oh, yes. So my firewall is up. It was the Internet Gateway Association that made it not to work. So I proceed. Mm, check. Let me check my security group. Okay, so this was the one I created. I have HTTP and HTTPS open. So I have all outbound going. So my security group is fine. Okay, FortiGate is back. I believe it was booting, was trying to initialize. I didn't do any other thing. So whenever you have it deployed, it gives you hints that your username is admin and your password is your instance ID. So I'll accept this. So my username is admin and my password. So let's go. My password is my instance ID. Okay, so put in the instance ID. I configure a new password. Okay, so I've set up the new password. It's very important that you don't leave it in the default. That's one of the most common security risks with most internet facing or IoT devices. Okay, so I'll begin with this. It asks me to specify a host name. I can say FGT, FortiGate, firewall, and next gen firewall. Dashboard, decide to use the default, which is optimal. And that is it. We have our firewall already deployed. Um, so let me turn off this. Okay, so let me walk you through a bit of it. So this is a FortiGate firewall. Um, I was thinking the host name will have changed because I changed it then. So, but this is the host name. This is the serial number of the FortiGate firewall. This is the version which we saw when we're deploying, and then the mode is NAT because everything behind the firewall we need to go through the NAT to the internet. Okay, I have like 9 minutes to go. So you have a license. This license is pay as you go. You can connect with FortiCare support by registering or creating an account, and you can link it with FortiCare. But the key things to point out here is on the network you have interfaces. So in the interface, remember I made mention that you will just have one interface here. So I need to add another interface to represent the internal network. Okay, so I can just call it port 2. I can call it internal. Okay. Okay. Let me add it from outside. Yeah. And just create an interface to it. I can't create it from here, so let me go and create it from outside. Network interface. I'll go to my VPC. Mm, where is this? Mm, Find somewhere here. Mm, for some reason, I can't find it. Okay, this is what I was looking for. A private subnet. Can auto assign. Use my default school, yeah. Okay, so since I created the second one, I'll just attach it quickly to the virtual machine, to the FortiGate. So this is the one we just created. Can leave the other defaults. So now my FortiGate firewall has two virtual interfaces. So one on the private, one on the public. So and you can see it here now. So I'll need to assign this IP to it. You can decide to let's open a ping on it. Mm, You need to be in a subnet. Okay, so I have the two interfaces here. Mm, okay, because of our time, let me just run through. So the static route is how you tell the firewall where to forward traffic. Usually, there's always a default route, which will be your default gateway, more like sending the traffic to the internet. Then, when it comes to policies, you come to your firewall policies, and you can create policies. So I'm running up in a Jiffy. So when you come to create a firewall policy here, you give it a name. Let's say sample policy. You choose your incoming interface. Our incoming interface, if we're coming from inside to outside, then you choose our interface. Yes. You choose a source IP address, It can be all. You choose a destination. It can be Microsoft or your Gmail. You choose the type of service, whether it's HTTP, HTTPS, or web service. You can choose that, and you can embed NAT to it. So this is just a typical example. Now, when you come to sequence here, this is the default deny rule I spoke about when we're looking at the best practices. So anything that comes above this rule is what is allowed. If you don't allow it, it's going to be denied. Okay, so let me
Samuel.
a hard stop here. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that was a great session. We're almost out of time. So Samuel, well done, well done. Does anyone have any questions for Samuel? Any questions? Samuel, it feels like everybody knows what you've done, and, and there's no need for questions. We have very smart people on the call. Any questions? Okay, no questions. Samuel, I feel you did a very good job in terms of
Thank
like
you.
explaining what needs to be said in terms of security, and also you did a very good one in terms of also doing a hands-on lab, because it's one thing for you. Yeah, people, as Ibakuro just said, yeah, we are still trying to take it in to show you how deep it is. Okay, I think there's a question. So Okonkwo is saying that since this was deployed on an EC2, does it mean one would need to manage the OS patches? If so, can one deploy this as an image instead?
Okay. So the OS patches is managed by the FortiGate OS. Let me just quickly share my screen to show you this.
Somewhere, there's no time. There's no time. Just
Okay,
answer
so
the
okay,
question
no
because it's
problem.
already, we
So
have just 1 minute.
you can actually update the OS or the operating system or patches on it. So once you update that on the firewall, it affects the operating system. So it has its custom patches, it has its OEM delivered patches and updates that you can do on the firewall during the maintenance window. And just like your Windows 10, it will update, restart, and come up. Yes.
Okay, I hope that answers your question. I think we have another question, and this would be the last question. What is the cloud security landscape in Africa, Nigeria, and Ghana, to be specific? Is a very good question.
Yeah. So it's the same as saying what is the cloud adoption landscape. So cloud security, there's no all I say there's no cloud security without cloud. So whenever on any enterprise where you have cloud being used, especially AWS, you would definitely need to have cloud security because you need to protect your resources in the cloud, and you need to understand what they call the shared responsibility. There's a part you have to play when it comes to security. There's a part the cloud provider will need to play. And there's a concept which we call you are responsible for the security in the cloud, while the cloud provider is responsible for security of the cloud. Yeah.
Okay. This is the last question because we're already above time from God's time. God's time is saying, what is this? What is its advantage over AWS network firewall?
Yes. So one of the beauty of having a third party firewall here is more like leveraging on the expertise of people who are concentrated in that area. So if you use the native, they'll work, but this very one you are having firewalls that are the best in the industry. So when it comes to security, they are top notch. So they give you that comfort when it comes to protecting your infrastructure, protecting your cloud services, because you are having a specialized vendor, a specialized company providing those services. and you know that whatever it is you've had deployed is best across the industry. So that's the advantage of deploying a third-party firewall like FortiGate.
That should be the last question, but I think there's something more interesting here. Okay, what about cost? I beg. We are beginning to have more questions.
Yeah,
I think we'll just share your email or your LinkedIn, and let me just put that in the chat, and people can send you messages directly. I would really love us to answer all these questions, but we're out of time. Good. That's Samuel Modupe's LinkedIn. You can reach out to him. Or
you
Samuel,
can
is there any other
connect with
way?
me. No, you
Okay,
can reach
okay.
out to me on LinkedIn, can connect with me. Yeah.
Sounds good. Sounds good. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for attending today's session. Because of time, we can't continue, but I believe you've gained a lot of information from our Oga here, Samuel. All right. So
Thank you.
see you. I think we have another session tomorrow. I won't be anchoring that, but someone else will anchor it. It will be nice if you show up. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's session. See you tomorrow. Bye.
Yeah.